So there's been a lot of people going to WA to actually work on the mines, and in that time, there's a lot of people that have made lots of money and have experienced wealth and gain and fun, and WA boomed for a while. But now there's a shift going on, and mental health has become one of those factors as a lot of people, men and women, that fly in and fly out. On today's show, we're going to be speaking to an expert that deals with these people. Hi, welcome to the Secret Men's Business Podcast. This is Joey Buzzattle, and on today's show, we're speaking to Paul Smith, an expert on FIFO, flying in, flying out, and he's going to tell us about his business and how he's helping people, men and women, transfer and transform their life. Paul, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me on, mate. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to a chat.
Thank you. I actually just realised when I was talking to you, you do work with men and women, or is it just men?
There's women reaching out as well, so it's something. Predominantly, I haven't, but it's something that certainly trying to help those women as well if they need it, for sure.
Yeah, the reason why I actually brought that up is because the only people I know that have worked on the mines have all been women.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah, like I've only met the people that work in the offices.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting, and there is a big shift going on out there too, and which is great for the women out there getting their foot in the door and doing the things, and lots of operators and all sorts of different tasks now that they're doing, and why not?
Yeah. I mean, as you know, this is a men's only podcast, but we've actually expanded and we're on YouTube now. So the exciting thing is that this interview now can be heard by women as well. So, Paul, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background before we get started into what you do?
Yeah, look, I mean, in brief, growing up in a big family and living in a small town and all those things, and I guess if I start the journey back then and as through those teenage years getting involved in sport, but also then getting involved in the drugs and alcohol side of things as well from a young age, and that through my teenage years into the early 20s was a significant part, and significant issues were created from that as well. I was married very early, gained a 15-month-old stepson immediately, which was fantastic. He's now 22. And then, married really early, lots of relationship troubles. We had a daughter, we separated. All of those things that so many go through, just happened to go through it a little bit earlier, I guess, than some. But through that time, as a carpenter by trade, building houses and building public works and all that stuff, and always just wanted to be a builder. But through that time, experienced all those troubles and hardships, and then had to go back and really reassess at that point in my life to start with. And I was given the door into the civil industry. So for that, I took that. I went back as a labourer onto the civil sites, into the mining sort of side of things, and basically worked my way through from that point, and started to rebuild what was a pretty rocky time in my life to start with. So from there, that sort of just progressed into the supervision management side of things, and then it allowed me to, I guess, get into that fly in, fly out industry to start with, which I guess there the journey begins.
So I guess I want to understand it more, but for our listeners, when we talk about flying in, flying out, can you sort of give us a general idea of what the time frame is? Is it 2 weeks still, or could there be longer periods that they're away from everyone?
Oh, look, there's a whole swag of different rosters out there now, and the general one, there's a lot of even time ones coming in now. So the 2 on 2 off, or 2 on 1 off, 3 and 1, 4 and 1. But there's also longer rosters, and internationally, I did a 3-month roster, 2-week off roster. So I mean, so you start to, the oil and gas, they have different ones if they're offshore and things. So there's a whole variety of it, really. But yeah, it is essentially you're away from home for that period of time, pretty well working the whole time, and get a break.
And, you and I were talking before we press record, and it is. I just started thinking that when you were saying that because you go away and it's far away, I really do think that there is this disconnection from the public. The public doesn't really. It knows that you guys are doing all this great work, but it doesn't really know what's going on because of this fly in, fly out thing. So how do you think the public can start to learn that this is, that men and women are having a problem with their mental health by doing this type of work?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I guess it's that attachment to your you're mining, and we sort of touched on it earlier. You're mining, you've got plenty of money, you've got all these things, but the common reality is that many of them have many more issues that they don't understand because, the strain on relationships for being away, the strain on mentally for living away in camps, and some are better than others.
Mm,
Different areas, of course, different temperatures, all of those things combined, spending all of that time away from home with predominantly people that you don't know, they're work colleagues, but they're not necessarily close mates. Yeah, it becomes a real battle. And then
mm,
there's the communication issues with all sorts of different things that
mm.
go on with it. So there is a real disconnect with how people perceive it,
Yeah,
and to be able to explain it if you haven't been there, it's a real tricky
sure.
challenge as well.
What about? I'm just wondering again with the men, when with men sometimes being uncomfortable with being vulnerable. Is there a culture on the mine, to encourage people to talk, or is there a culture where no one talks? Because
Well,
it is a big thing that we're working on, isn't it? I'm just guessing that's why you do what you do, is that we want to encourage men to be able to say when they're experiencing depression or anxiety, rather than having a way of pushing it away. So, because it's a camp and there's a group of men, is it more heightened there? Are people less talkative about what they're feeling?
I would, from my personal experience and opinion, would be that majority of people don't talk about it because of that, that old male-dominated culture of just toughen up, harden
Yeah.
up, take a cup of cement type scenario, and look, whilst there's still elements of that out there, and I think there's still a lot of that out there, but it's starting to shift a little bit, and there's the awareness there to speak up, yet
Mm.
the ability for someone to speak up is still the challenge.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the challenge, I agree with you. I think that there's been a major shift, especially the last few years with Me Too and with all those things that men are involved in to change our behaviors. That the key is that the men, people go to workshops like the footy players and all that. But the key is, how do we then allow ourselves to do it? That's what I find frustrating, because I think a lot of men are really educated these days. But then when they get into a group of men, they don't really think about what they should do, right? Um, I'm just wondering, if you are experiencing that trauma or that mental health problem in up there, how do you like? How do they deal with it? Are they hiding their emotions, or do people know that they're depressed, and that creates another problem? Like, what have you noticed with people that do have mental health problems up there?
Well, I think there's definitely the fact that they hide it well, and from my own personal experience, majority of people wouldn't have known the realities behind the scenes of what was I was actually struggling with.
Mm,
It's easier to put on that brave face every day and show up, uh, yet it's so difficult as well.
mm.
But
But
unless you really allow someone to open up and be vulnerable with you, they're going to stay pretty guarded, especially if you don't have that close knit relationship, which is the
yeah.
key issue out there. You don't have that.
Yeah, because I had mental health problems years ago, and that's why I do what I do. But it's funny when you have a mental health problem, you can hide in your home. But I'm just trying to comprehend what it must be like to have a mental health problem where you've got nowhere to hide. You've got to wear that mask for 2 weeks or how long you're out there. That must be really exhausting when you can't just go and hide somewhere and then go back the next day. You know what I mean? Like, so was that something that you felt happened to you? Like, did you have to really be diligent to not get people to see what you were going through?
Oh, look, definitely. And I guess, and sometimes that shift can be so far the other way that you become that jovial, you become that joker
Mm,
because you don't want them to see that you're upset or sad behind the scenes. When reality is, and look, I actually don't like the whole mental health side of it, even though that's the attachment to it. But I think it's just everyone's lifelong struggles or journeys that become something more than they should be, when if we just really broke it down and allowed it to be an open conversation to say that these things do happen and it is just reality,
yeah,
then the attachment or that stigma attachment to it doesn't become so great either.
yeah.
But
Uh,
it's definitely something that people do. They put on that brave face, they hide behind it, and then will go and shut themselves out
mm.
in their
I mean,
cabin.
I think you've raised a really important point that, and I guess I'm talking about it as mental health because this is a mental health podcast, but you've made me realize that it's probably similar to the farmers. Like, they found that if they went to the farmers and talked about mental health, no one would listen, but they changed the dialogue and they started talking about tractors. So, how would you treat your tractor if it was out of petrol or if it was bogged? And in reality, the tractor was them, right? And I watched that documentary going, wow, that really is interesting. So what you're really highlighting is when we're talking to blokes, like, these people that work on the mines are, they're hardcore men. Well, that's how I imagine it. So again, I'm assuming. I imagine that you have to change the language to make them comfortable, right? So as a person that goes out there and helps them, or how are you talking to them? What are you using to get them to open up to you?
Just treating them like a human and knowing that we all go through something, and it doesn't matter what that is, but the ability to change that is there if they want it. And it's just as simple as firstly owning it and knowing that they're not 100% in their head. They know that there's something that's annoying them or triggering them or frustrating them and making them angry. And generally in these circumstances, it's the scenario that they've put themselves into. And have they put themselves into that scenario with any structure or routine, or have they just gone there hoping that it's going to work out?
Right.
So many don't have any structure and they have no routine, and it's just every day they just try something and they just get out of bed and they do the same thing. That whole continual cycle of nothing ever changes becomes that repetitive mindset that I can't get out of this. I'm stuck. I'm in jail. I've got the golden handcuffs, so they say, and I can't get out. I can't lose what I've got
Yeah.
because it was so hard to get to here anyway.
Well, I guess listening to you say that, is there been a correlation or a opening up by the businesses that hire them to understand? Do they understand mental health, or because I'm sort of getting this feeling that we know there's a problem, but we're not going to really do anything about it? Or am I wrong there? Are they doing things to help these guys?
Well, they're absolutely doing things to help.
Okay.
From my perspective, are we doing it the right way? I would say no. I'm leaning towards no with my opinion,
Wow.
because what I've seen is that it's so reactive. We've got the EAP services, those things there, but that's almost the last straw for some people. Why are we
Yeah.
allowing it to get to that point? Why are we?
Yeah. Why do
Why
you
are we
think? Because I work for EPA. That's
yeah.
that we were talking about earlier. So you're right, because I'm dealing with a lot of businesses that it's under last resort. So I'm a little bit perplexed why there's nothing else in place. Why do you think Australia? Because that's where we're seeing it. Why do you think that there's this complacency about waiting to the last minute? In regards to management looking and saying, what is that about? What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think they're. How do you say this in a nice way? And I think
Say it, and I can edit it if you're going to say it badly.
no. Well, I think we're doing it for the wrong reasons. We're doing it because we have to, as opposed because we want to. And
Right.
I find that some businesses out there are doing it purely to tick the box because that's what they need to do, and they need to show up and they need to say that they have the services in place
I
and they've
agree.
got the things there, but they're not really taking the full ownership of it and really making it something that's important to them.
Yeah, I
We're
agree.
treating them like employees and we're not treating them like humans. Now,
Yeah. Well,
that's the disconnect.
that also ties into it really ties into we have to start changing the way we do business, because at the moment business is globalized, so it's about money, and of course money doesn't involve people. Because I interviewed a fella last week, and he's trying to change the world by actually doing that. He's trying to get corporations to make people remember that it's not about money, because I think that's where we need to start. Because you're right, the management say, "Oh, look, we've ticked the box, they've got that," but really, I believe it should have started at the interview.
It should be starting at the interview, and I firmly believe in what I want to do is make it part of the induction process, the onboarding process, as to how do you know what you're getting yourself into if you've never
Exactly.
done it, or how do you do it differently if you have done it and it hasn't worked for you before, or you've created or you've experienced the same issues.
Yeah.
So,
And
what are we?
how would you do that? Would it be through a psych test, or like
I,
how would you measure if someone's able to cope?
I don't think it needs to be measured in that regard, because I think people can deal with it and cope with it if they have the
Mm,
understanding of what they're going to be doing and the understanding of how they go about it. If they set up those routines and those structures correctly, if they allow themselves to actually be aware of the, sorry, just had a delivery there, to be aware of the the dynamics of what they're getting themselves into, then they can start to implement those strategies going forward to create the changes so they don't go down that rabbit hole of, oh my God, I didn't even know how I got there.
Yeah, I would have thought that people would have been aware of what's going on by hearing it from their mates, or do you think that there's a bit of a fantasy about what they're getting themselves into? Like, I know that when I hear about what you guys do, I instantly get anxiety, so I know I would never cope, right? Because I don't like being away um, from my friends and family. But the thing is that are you thinking that a lot of men are just not thinking about that because they're seeing the money, or they're seeing the sort of like the 2 weeks off without realizing all the other things that are coming in that are involved?
Oh,
Like,
definitely. And there is that dollar figure attached to it. And if anyone says they've gone to FIFO for any other reason to make some extra money, they'd be lying.
mm,
Now, while some people do enjoy it, there are those people out there, but majority are going to make the extra money. But if you break it down to the hourly rate that you get,
mm,
whilst it may be a little bit higher, no one really breaks it down over the 24-hour period that they're there. Whilst they may work 11 hours a day, 12 hours, 13, 14 hours a day, you're there 24 hours.
mm,
You're away from home, you're away from your friends and family. So
yeah,
if you actually take that into account, are you actually getting as paid as well as you can be? Because
because you're there for like the whole time.
you're there the whole time. You're missing. They're missing the point. You can shop online. You can do all those things. Yes, you can't go out and spend, but so many do because they're bored. They're spending online. They're waiting. They're getting the toys. So are they actually realizing that they're putting themselves into a
Mm,
scenario where they're digging a hole before they actually get into it?
yeah. And what do you feel? I know that there are married people there, and probably a lot of single guys there. What are some of the main things that cause these guys to not feel good? Like, what are you noticing are some of the themes?
Well, it all starts with the whole complete structure, and depending again where you are, you might be onto the bus first thing in the morning, and some people, you may be anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour away from the site, where the camp is. So you're adding that travel time on. So you herd it in. You're on the bus with the people that you work with. So you're up early, all of those things, and then you're home late, and then you got to rush in. You've got to get your food. You got to have your shower. You got to do all these things that, whilst they're normal, it always seems to be if I
Mhm.
haven't done it, I'm always in a rush. I can't
Right.
I can't relax yet. Then I can't unwind. I don't want to talk to anyone because I've had a long day. I've been talking to the same people all day. Like, just leave me alone.
Well, if you're working
And
12 hours, I guess that day's going to go quick, isn't it?
well, they can go quick sometimes, yeah, and they
No,
can they.
meaning that's not really giving you much time to unwind or to do all that stuff. It's like basically get home, do all those things, go to bed, get up, do it again. And they work 14 days straight, don't they? Or is it like, do you have a hot day off, or is it just working straight through?
There are rosters where you'll have the lay day in the middle for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, anything else? Like, I'm really curious about if a lot of people that go there that are married, do they end up having marriage problems because of that distance? Like, I've seen a few. The women that I saw were coming to see me for that reason. Like, they were going away. They thought it was going to be good financially, and then once they started, they realized that 2 weeks off is a long time, and so that created marriage problems for them. So, have you noticed if that happens?
Yeah, that's massive. It is
Right.
the relationship strain of being away. And I go back to talking about the routine and the structure here. It's so important because there's two sides to FIFO,
Mm.
and it's the husband or wife at home, or the husband and wife in at camp. Now you've got your routine in that, but when you come back and you try and fit into the routine at home, and especially I'm talking from a male perspective, you come home, the wife's been at home, however many kids you've been doing the school run, the pets, the house, the maintenance, all of those things, you come back into that dynamics and try and fit in, but so many make it about them. It's my time off. I've got a week off. I should be able to sit here with my feet on the lounge and relax.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you've got to fit back into that same routine.
Yeah.
That's where so many get it wrong. And, there's so many wives out there that I've heard that it's, he comes home, it's like a whirlwind. He disrupts the routine that I've got, makes a mess and then leaves. And then I've got to
Yeah.
pick up the pieces for the next few weeks.
Yeah.
So that's where you get that dynamics of that argumentative
So
state.
so the resentment gets caught I mean,
Mm.
that my client would say to me that she loved it when he left. So it went from "I miss you" to "Oh my God, just leave." So it just changes. Do you in your work do you try and help the guys understand that and are they able to adapt and change the
Well, a
guys?
big part of it is to get them to see that from that different perspective. And it's not all about me. It's not all about when I come home, I should get this. It's when I come home, I have to do certain things to fit back in to the routine is there.
Mm,
But I also try and encourage that you have to have some time to yourself to fill your own cup so you can give more. So
yeah.
it's so important. And so many see it as selfish. I can't go home and just do my own thing. I can't go to the beach. I can't go fishing, go on the motorbike, whatever you may like, because I've got this list of chores. I've got to do the school run. It's almost you walk in the door. Here's the kids. It's your turn.
Here's two more weeks. Yeah, like I mean, it is interesting. I mean, like, this is a big debate that's gone on for decades because it's interesting how men, and this is one of the main things that I work on with my clients or in the group, is that men still have this belief that they have to be serviced or that women's role is to service us. And I'm only assuming here, so please don't attack me. I assume that a lot of the guys on those mines would have a bit of a social construct about where their role is. So maybe that could be part of the problem for them. Like they deserve to have 2 weeks off, but they haven't thought about the fact that their wives have worked 2 weeks as well, and she also deserves 2 weeks off. So where do you think that sort of deluded idea comes from? Is it just a cultural thing that these guys have been fed their lives?
Well, it's definitely something that anyone around our ages has grown up with in that past thought or and seen the grandparents, and that's how they sort of live. So I guess that's still coming through, but there's also a sense of ego attached, and there's a sense of pride attached. There's a sense of stubbornness attached. All of these things as blokes that we think we deserve something, yet in
Yeah,
actual fact we hard to
yeah,
compromise.
you're right. It's like it's the role thing. We've been told that that's our role, and so it's hard sometimes to break that role to understand that everything needs to be equal. They're my kids as well. This is my backyard that I need to mow. This is my house. But how are you finding that dialogue? Because I'm just curious to know if you have any tricks for how do you get someone to see that? Because if they're stubborn or it's been inbuilt or it's cultural, like their dad taught them that, sometimes it's hard to to change a guy. So I'm curious to know what you do or how you find your strategies may work.
Yeah, I guess, and I was no different as well. One of probably the most stubborn blokes out there. Like it was never, it was always, it's about me, sort of thing. But when you disconnect the ego from that and you see things and you look at it from a different perspective, and everyone's journey is different, but it's and I firmly believe personal development is the key element here, and that underlying personal development is finding that balance, that routine, and that structure that you work as a team, and that when this is home, we're going to do this. Yes, we've got the things that we need to do, but we've also got the things we need to do for us, and we need to
Yeah.
do them individually, but we also need to do them together to
Mm,
blend that environment back so you can truly have that balance in the life and still have the enjoyment as well.
mm.
If you take those things out of it, then that's when the resentment, that's when the guilt and the regret and all those things come into it, because we're just coming from a place of being selfish, or we're coming from a place of
Me, me, me.
me, me, me. Yeah, exactly.
So where are we at? You think have we just started, or have you noticed that there's been you've been doing this job for a while, so have you noticed that momentum has been building? Because I guess if the industry doesn't see it as their responsibility, then it could slow it down, can't it? Because I would think that it would be so good, for example, if you had like a men's circle on one of those rosters, so men could go and talk or
Mm.
something like that. So where are we at in regards to men understanding that they have to learn this ego talk?
Well, everyone's got to come to their own realization, yes, but the awareness around that, I think, needs to be lifted as to we can do this, and if we, as men, we're that tribal, we're that team oriented sort of people anyway. Introvert, extrovert, it doesn't matter. We still like to be congregated. We still like community. We still
Mm,
like groups. And when we see others do it, it allows people to open up to come into that space as well. And it's not that push you in. It's that
Right.
I'm interested to come in because
Yeah.
what are they actually doing? Because they seem to,
Yeah.
whilst it may not be 100% right, at least it's something different, and at least it's
Mm.
giving the opportunity to, I guess, feel
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah, I think you're totally right, actually. Like, I think men prefer to watch and then, because I think it's a lot of guys find it intimidating. So the brave ones will go and do the first thing. Like, I run a men's circle, and like, at the beginning, no one would come. And I'm thinking, what am I doing wrong? Right. But then the guys that came started changing. And then all of a sudden, more men started coming. So it was funny. Like, they wouldn't come because it was an opportunity to change. They only came when they had evidence that other people got something out of it. So, I think that's a really good point, that it has to be a group consciousness. Like, all men need to be aware that we need to change. And that's a big job, I think, to try and change every man's how they see stuff. Do you agree with that?
I definitely, it's a huge job to change every man. But
Yeah.
as those guys start to see changes in other people, and it's, and look, from personal experience, being that stubborn, cranky person, my nickname was Cranky for many years playing rugby, and some of the boys still call me that, but I laugh at it now. But it was always that.
I
But as
can't.
you
I
start to
can't
see
even. I
that
can't. Even,
shift,
I can't even imagine you. Like, your energy coming through the computer is so soft. So I don't have. I really want to try and figure out how you shifted that. Like, what was your epiphany? Because if you describe yourself as cranky, I can't. I can't feel that from you. So you obviously did a really good job of getting rid of cranky.
well, when you get to that point, and this is the, I guess, the epiphany moment you call it. I was sitting in my cabin on, in Saudi Arabia, and I was working away overseas on those long rosters, and no time off. There was no work life balance. There was nothing. For the first 9 months that I was there, it was just work, work, work. Yes, I'd come home for the school holidays, have that, roughly 10 or 11 days minus the travel once you got there. Um, but when I caught myself, crying in the corner of my cabin one day, and not knowing how I'd got to that place,
Wow.
but it was that fact that I knew that if I didn't do something different, was I actually going to go home the way I wanted to go home?
Yeah.
So it was that moment that made me realize
Mm.
I need to let go of this frustration, this bitterness, this anger, this regret, and the crankiness, because all it's doing is bringing me down. And it's just, and I wasn't seeing the situations for what I was in. I was seeing them still from that dollar figure of, I was too stubborn to walk away and step away because I had that pride attached and that ego attached to saying, I'm going to go and do something. I'm signing up for a 2-year contract. I'm going to see it through no matter what it costs me.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, when
Well,
you,
the amazing thing is that you allowed yourself to be vulnerable and to have awareness, because that is also a big problem. Is that a lot of guys may believe that they're crying in the corner, may be weak, and then they'll push you down. But you were, I like to use the word brave. I think that you were brave enough to actually look at it, and then now you're helping those guys. So when did you realize that you have the gift? Because you have a gift. I can hear you the way you talk. When did you realize that Mr. Cranky can actually help other guys?
it was that same period of time, and then I started to create, Facebook groups and things like that that have evolved into different things. And it was coming from a point of, if I'm feeling this way, then the tens and tens of thousands of people around the world that do these sorts of jobs, there's got to be other people that are feeling this way as well. Now, I set that up thinking I was helping others to have those conversations and to have those chats, one-on-one chats, group chats, whatever. But in a sense, it was giving me that space to speak that I needed as well.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it
I mean,
was
that's good. That's good.
it was bizarre because I hadn't recognized that at that point. I
Yeah.
thought I was doing something for someone else, but when I look back, it was as much for others as it was for me, because at that point I needed that connection. I needed that venting, and I needed to know that I was, I guess, being heard, but other
Mm.
people were hearing the same message, so they could allow themselves to break down that wall a little bit as well.
Mm. And also, I think that in mental health, with male, issues, what you're describing is really important. That is that you represented a mirror. You didn't stand in front of the group and make them feel like you were the leader and they were, you were the mirror, so they could see themselves in you, which helped them to change. Um, did you, like, in your lifetime, did you ever imagine that you would do this? Did you have a moment where, years ago that you thought, I want to be someone that's going to help and support men, or did that whole time period in your life really open you up to new things?
Well, it definitely opened me up to new things. I guess there's always been that. I look back and see that there's always been that sort of natural leadership qualities there, but I've never given them self credit, if that makes sense.
Mm,
I've never allowed that to, and I guess that's from, and dad's taught me that humility is so important as well. So you can lead without actually having to be seen. That's, and I guess, but stepping into that role and stepping into that being seen was
mm,
probably the challenge for me, because it's not about that. It's just about that message that if we allow people to be heard, in time they'll allow themselves to be seen, which is enough to give them back that self
yeah,
confidence and that self worth.
I love that. Uh, Now, do you mind if I talk about a little bit of a sensitive topics? Because I know that there may be, corporations that don't want to admit that it happens, but I'm just curious about, because you get a group of guys on a camp. Like, is there bullying? Is there a hierarchy? And is that also part of the problem?
There's absolutely that still goes on in camps and environments. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
there's the different groups, of course, and it's
yeah,
how you choose your groups is a real key component
yeah.
to
Because
how
it's
you
really, it's
survive.
really, it's really weird, but it's like a prison, isn't it? In a way, for 2 weeks, these guys are living together, and there's because I was thinking about this before I called you, and that is that how does a new person who's fresh and maybe not experienced, are there guys that welcome them, or is it a tough experience because of that? I am curious about the bullying, about if men are still doing that to other men, or are we at a place where we're learning? Like, the bullying to me is a big issue because it does cause a lot of guys to commit suicide. So what did you experience or see with that, with bullying, and with how people are treated when they come in, and if they're different, for example?
I think it happens without people actually realizing they're doing it a lot of the time,
Right.
because of their own personality and their own egos and how they were raised or how they have made themselves fit into that environment. Now, some of those people have put themselves and put that persona on, which comes across as bullying, but it's
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
it's their own mechanism of coping as well. So they're not necessarily meaning to do it, but when you've got so many blends of different personalities and nationalities and all of those things, and that cultural experience as well, it's
It's
it's a
intense.
really tough blend to get to, and you have
Yeah.
to unfortunately find your own way.
Yeah.
But that's where there's the disconnect. We're not allowing people into these, and we're just throwing them to the wolves in a sense. We're just, and every camp I've been to, it's you go, you sign your paper, you get your key, and your room's over there. There's the food hall type scenario. Good luck,
Mm.
next. So it's not. There's no that real orientation of getting to find your feet to feel comfortable. It's
Yeah.
you should be able to handle this. Here's your key. Go away.
Yeah.
It's like you check into a motel. You're on your own.
Yeah. So I guess that's why I brought the bullying thing up. So I don't. Is it just dismissed by the management, or is it something that you guys have to sort out yourselves? Like, how did if you're just given a key and then there's bullying, it must be so scary for someone who's been attacked or bullied or teased to go back to the camp when they don't feel like there's a structure in place that's going to change it.
Well, that's right, and look, it's a lucky dip too. Like you get your key, and like whoever's room you end up next to is if that's your room for a certain period of time, or some people change cabins every roster as well. So you never know who you might be living next to.
Right.
If you so there's that as well. You're almost introducing yourself to new people. You're finding yourself on new feet all the time. Um,
So it could be
it,
hard for an introvert. Like, introverts that have to do, like, I can imagine there'd be certain people that would thrive off that and love that,
mhm.
and then there are certain people that probably Again, there's so many different. I didn't even think about the fact that there's different races. I mean, there'd be so many different variances that's going on there. So it is a quite an interesting environment, and that's what makes it even more fascinating. By your term of they throw them into the wolves is sort of like true in a way that there's no one structuring anything or preparing anyone. So, what's your vision for how you want to change that culture?
Oh, look, I just want people to go there knowing that they've got specific goals, specific reason for being there. So, and they've really assessed that versus the timeline that they're there for.
Right.
If you don't have that, and you're just hoping that you're going to go there and make your money and retire happily ever after, you set yourself up for failure to start with. And we've all done it. I've done it myself. You just go there, you're looking at the dollars, but there's no sense behind the dollars,
Mm.
because you don't have that structure, you don't have the specific goal, there's not an outcome base that you want. So when those times get tough, you can look at that, you can see that, no, I'm here for this reason, I'm here for this timeline to achieve this for us.
Right.
So it's
But do you think that it'll ever evolve where it'll go? Like I love that, right? But do you think that there'll be a time in the future where it'll be a bit more, um, like regulated or controlled in the camp? Like there might be a therapist that works there full time, or there might be meetings. Do you think that would ever happen, or is that too far ahead?
there's elements of it happening in all, and of course I haven't been in all camps, so I can't say or speak for all of them, only the ones that I've been in. But if they start to implement those things in there and give different options as to the normal, the sporting field, the gym, and the ping pong table or the pool or wherever you are, they start to implement something else and these structures around it. The little groups of men's circles. That's probably going to be seen as the weak. For starters, who cares?
Mm,
But if we start to do something different, because what we can definitely say is that what we're doing now isn't good enough, because the statistics are still there. So
yeah,
something needs to shift. And
yeah,
no matter how you look at that, no matter what it is, we can do better.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Paul, thank you so much for sharing. I think this is a really, it's like a silent topic, isn't it? It's like, I think that people that listen to this podcast are going to learn a lot today, because there is a bit of a culture about out of mind, out of sight. So we see mental health in the city, but we don't really think about it when people are away. So thank you for giving us light and showing us that.
No, absolutely. Hope some sort of that little insight just does bring that awareness, and it may only be to that one person that needs it too, and that's enough.
Yeah, I know some of our listeners do live in WA, and also they. Oh, you're in Queensland, aren't you?
I'm in Queensland, yeah.
Yeah, so I've got listeners everywhere, but I'll put your web information, and if people want to hook up with you to get some coaching or some advice, I'll get them to click on that link. So thanks again.
Absolutely. No problem, Joe. Appreciate it, mate.
You've been listening to the Secret Men's Business podcast, so don't forget that our new podcast is out at 9 a.m. every Monday morning. Now, before you go down there and click like, and also subscribe to our podcast so you get notifications every time a new episode comes out. Have a great week, everyone. Bye.